One of these. So anyway, with keeping with this month's themes, first I thought, I went off on what I felt led to speak on, and it really is just it's really apropos for what the topics were this month. See thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, and so the topic today is, well, then why judgment? If we have these things, we have this love inside, this ability to have answers to whatever comes in our challenges, then why judgment? And the world says, why not? You turn on the news, there's a lot of judgment. The government's full of judgment. You go to a PTA meeting, there's judgment. There's just judgment everywhere you go. And this judgment wants to come from having answers. And so I looked up some things, and Webster's dictionary defines judgment as the ability to judge, make a decision, or form an opinion objectively, authoritatively, and wisely, especially in matters affecting action, good sense, and discretion. Okay. I like number 4. It said the forming of an opinion, estimate, notion, or conclusion as from circumstances presented to the mind. And this is more so on what the topic is here, the type of judgment we're talking about. And it is from these circumstances presented to the mind, but where do we get the information to respond to these circumstances? I came across this really interesting quote. I was looking for some kind of quote on opinions or whatever, and I found one from Oscar Wilde. It said, most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives a mimicry, their passions a quotation. And while I was looking at that, I stumbled onto one from Tim Kreider, who said, this is spot on. One reason we rush so quickly to the vulgar satisfactions of judgment and love to revel in our righteous outrage is that it spares us from the impotent pain of empathy and the harder, messier work of understanding. And it is that work. We hear this from Byron Katie. She talks about the work. You can go back into the Russian philosopher Gurdjieff. He was real big on that the work that it took to stay in that place, it's not a thing we come here on Sunday and I'm going to stay in this space and, drive off out here. And there's a million opportunities out there to get into some kind of judgment. So where does this come from? Because we start out as this baby, and you look at a baby, they're pure, they're sweet, and they stink once in a while, but they're a blank cassette. And then people start putting stuff on them. We got these rules, these structures, and we need structure, but we get ideas, we get belief systems. And one of the first things that comes up for a baby, it'll ask the parents at some age, maybe 5, 6, where did I come from? And the parents kind of panic. Oh, it's that question. And I don't believe that the baby, the child, that young child is asking that question. I don't think it knows about sex parts at that time. It's asking, where did I come from? Where did all this come from? It's like it had amnesia coming from the spirit world, and all of a sudden I'm incarnate, and where did I come from? What's going on? So people give them these insane answers. The stork brought you, or, you came out of a pumpkin patch, or, the cabbage patch, or
the library.
Or the library. That was a good answer. Princess Amberlin knows. So what is this messy work? This messy work is one of forgiveness of all that I adopted, these belief systems that I adopted as these truths, that led me to be miserable because I couldn't understand, did I want to be right or do I want to be happy? And do I want to be one is really more like it, because happy is very conditional. Joy, when we seek joy and peace, we have something that's eternal, something that if we stay centered in that, no matter what you're going through, what grief process or whatever, you have joy. Happy might be an e-ticket ride at Disneyland. You know what I mean? It's kind of conditional. Somebody did this, you have some certain things. My child's doing this. I'm a little extra happy today. He achieved some award. But the deeper level that you relate to that child, is one of, the real connection of oneness. So that's what we're looking for. And so, this authoritative answers up here that was talking about judgments, it's this spirit inside intuitively knows these truths. It knows all that because it's really quite simple. The mind complicates this stuff. And, you know, and we hear this thing like you need to think outside the box. But we forget the thinker is the box. So the very thing I'm using to think is the box. And it's like I'm stuck in the box. And so it's a process of just letting go and loving and letting that, you know, serving as a channel, a conduit to let this love flow into the world. You know, because the world is basically a jungle of judgment. And it's kind of a natural conclusion when you got 7 billion souls out there. And I don't care if you have a mega church with 15,000 people and everybody, we're all on the same page. They're not. You know, when I speak to you and I tell you what I mean, you run it through your filters. You hear what I said in your way, and it might get close, but it's yours. And so there is no way that we can be on the exact same page. But we can if we reside in the Spirit. And I can be there even if I feel that that other person's not real with me at the time. They're there, and that's my challenge, is to honor that. And it is a challenge to say, I see the Christ in you, you know, as he's about to beat you over the head, or you know. And I remember, you know, for years I wanted to figure out the magic secret to where I could not have judgment on anything. I could not be persecuted. And I thought, wow, a lot of the sayings that come from Jesus or some of these great spiritual teachers, they were persecuted. I think they hung one of them. So, you know, there's you know, the rationale in there is not that I'm going to fit into this world. I am in this world, but I am not of this world. And so when I stick to that, no matter what they do, as Leslie was sharing, that it is this nature that when we live in the mind, we live in the world of judgments, we seek to kill one another. And that's basically, I want to be right. I want to put my authority over you. So basically, it goes back to this kid. If this baby at 5, 6 years old doesn't get an answer to what's it all about, whether it thinks it or not, there's an unease about that. And what that starts creating is a disease, and meaning dis-ease. And that disease starts growing inside because it wants answers. And it doesn't get answers. And everywhere it goes, you know, and I remember leaving from growing up in the Baptist church to going to, man, I went to a few churches. And I talked to a lot of people, a lot of different walks of life. And I was looking for core concepts, the common denominators in these, because I feel there has to be some truth in that. They all spoke of love. I might not have felt it the way I thought I wanted to or whatever, but they all spoke of this love. So, you know, what happens is people, you know, and we see it with many of us, is that if I can't find some solid ground for my spirit, then the mind becomes activated, and it becomes activated in all kinds of things. You know, one of the famous sayings all his life was Augustus Caesar said, give them their bread in circuses. Because, you know, basically some of these people, I can go through your pockets if I got you all titillated with this, that. And so there's some control to the masses like that. And the circuses that we get into are many. You know, they can be, you know, it's that thing of moderation. How do I find moderation in doing something? It can be just as simple as, you know, I like sports, or I can become what they call a fan, a fanatic. You know, I can go over the top, you know, and I can you know, just get in too deep. And so a lot of this stuff is that we're wanting to really immerse so that we don't have these nagging questions on us. You know, the TV is a great one for that. Let me just back off, and, you know, I don't have to think about anything. All my thoughts are already digested, they're already given to me. You know, we find that if we watch the news, everything's digested, it's spoon-fed to me so that I can understand the world. And, you know, I'm pretty sure every political debate or analysis I ever heard, every bit of news was the same rhetoric over and over. Every year it's the same thing, people saying the same thing. Why? Because, you know, that old saying, people will believe a big lie before they believe a little lie. People, in some way, if you're not centered in the truth, the Spirit, you want to believe something. You want to have an answer for it. And it's understandable to me that people would want to get something into black and white. You know, it's very hard if I come over to your house and hey, for the next 2 hours I'm here, I know nothing. People don't want to admit, I don't know. And, you know, when we were watching that movie with One Voice here a couple weeks ago, you know, one of the Hindu spiritual leaders was talking about, I mean, we can't get rid of I don't know. That's the best place to be. And I remember going jumping into that dark abyss from, no, I know, because I want to have something to know, to, wow, I got to be honest, I really don't know. And in not knowing, some knowing came. And so, you know, that's a beautiful thing. There's a book I'd let Leslie read it too, and he was familiar with these. If you look in the Old Testament, many of the New Testament, there's parables. You know, it's just loaded with parables. They didn't have CNN back then, so what they had was allegories. They had a way to preserve these little nuggets, these little wisdoms, so they passed it on. And then you'll get people who want to take it so literal. These are stories that are, you know, passed on. And one of the first we see is in Genesis, the beginning. And so it's very appropriate that in the beginning, one of the first deaths, kind of what Leslie was speaking of, that where man went into a spiritual death, you have these two people in the garden, and you hear these stories about Eve ate the apple. It doesn't mention that anywhere in there. That came 1008 maybe somewhere in another story. But they ate of this fruit. And they were told, do not eat of this fruit. You can partake of anything out there. Do not eat of this fruit. What is the fruit? The knowledge of good and evil. Judgment. That I know what's good for you. And later on in the New Testament, they spoke of, you know, pull the mote out of your eye before you pick the splinter out of your brother's eye. I can't figure out what I need half the time in my own life, but I'm going to take a good stab at what you need. You know? And so what that comes from is that projection from that uncomfortableness that, you know, and what it keeps telling me every time it comes up for me, there's more work, there's more to look at, there's more acceptance. You know, that poem was perfect. That's the way out of judgment is acceptance of myself just the way I am, and that there's nothing lacking. You know, like if I get up here to speak, I become nervous. Like, why would I be nervous? Well, because I'm worried about judgment. You know, this morning, should I wear a tie? Should I wear a tie? Should I not? And then I get here and everyone told me, I thought you were going to wear a tie. And I had to think about that. So, you know, and it's old school, and you know, I wonder, why do we wear a tie, you know? So people can hang me quicker when they don't like what I say. I got this piece of cloth hanging around my neck, you know. Most of my life I haven't been comfortable enough to, you know, get this dressed up. I've had jobs where I just like hands-on, you know, and kind of a casual deal, but it is nice to get dressed up. And that's kind of what we do with the mind. That's the thing of judgment. We dress our mind up so we have these, you know, we have fancy institutions with paper degrees to tell you, you know, and if you want to really learn all this, watch The Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's all in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy travels with the three aspects of herself, mind, body, and spirit, and she's going to the man that knows everything. And she gets there, and who but the dog, spelled backwards, you know, man's best friend is God, pulls the curtain back to reveal this scared little man running these levers with the big flames, and you know, all this is happening, all this judgment. And so he gives her this task, she gets the task, he still can't perform. At the end, he's like, I'll fly you back myself. You can do that? Yes, I've saved this balloon to fly you back. He, you know, because the dog jumps out and saves her again, God's like, that's not the way, don't go that way. She stays there, and here comes that side of her, the higher self, and Glinda appears and says, you had it all along. You didn't have to go through all the fear, and the witch, and the monkeys, and all the good stuff, and the trees that throw their apples. And I love those trees. And, you know, the answer was inside all the time, there's no place like home. And so, these parables, when we look at Genesis, we see that here was this snake, which represents the lowest thing you can do, comes up and presents this idea. No, you want to know, your eyes will be open, and then you too will be like God. Well, it's a false way. We already are God. So something's already trying to tell them, you're going to be like God. When the reality is that you already were. You already had all that, but I'm going to sell you another bill of goods. And so the first thing we do, we find that they leave the garden. They didn't die, but it told them, if you eat of this fruit, you shall surely die. Well, we know that they didn't physically die, so they spiritually died. So this is what happens every time, you know, and it happens within the minutes every day. We have these judgments, and we are creatures of first impression. It's hard to escape that. It's hard to stay in that moment of awareness. You know, Eckhart Tolle talks so much about the power now that, you know, we see somebody and they, you know, I remember my mom was a perfect example. This guy rented a place, they had this restaurant and he was renting it out. And this guy showed up in a suit, and he had short hair, and he ended up being a big ringleader in a meth distribution. And she told me, she goes, I don't understand. He looked just like I like. So she might have passed up the deal that would have worked, you know, by the guy who showed up with long hair and a little bit different than, you know, so we have no idea. But the just like Leslie was sharing, the damage and the burden we put on somebody, we think we're just adding to the misery of the world in all that 7 billion people that mix up by, you know, assuming I know what you're all about. You know, and I don't know about you, but my mind plays all kinds of stuff. I think I'm the amazing Creston on Johnny Carson. You know, I already know. Don't mind me with the facts. I can take a look at you, listen to you talk for a little bit, and you know, I know nothing. And even if I got close to it, I don't know what that means. You know, it's like we've all heard that story about the farmer in the village. You know, and he has the mayor, and everybody comes by and they say, "Oh, what a beautiful mayor you have." She is the mayor, is the most beautiful mayor you could ever have. And the next day he leaves the gate open, and the people from the village come by. What a fool you are, old man. You've left the gate open. Your mayor is gone. You're an idiot. And the next day the mayor comes back and brings 4 stallions, following her. And everybody's like, what a great man you are. You know, the end of that story is there is none. So that we think we know on one day that was a dumb thing, a bad thing, and, you know, we lay this judgment on it. And, you know, so this is what this parable is trying to tell us, is that we will be driven out into this worldly place of misery. And if you follow the story on, it's just one misery after another. And the Tower of Babel is the same type of story. It talks about how they built this tower that turned out to be confusion. And it was made out, they used bricks for stone, and stone in the allegories is representative of absolute truth. So they use a man-made truth for ultimate truth. And they use slime for mortar. That's the words they use. They use slime for mortars. And I remember, you know, my dad has been to the seminary. He speaks some Hebrew and Greek. And when he first saw that book, he's like, where did you get this? How did this guy know this? And it's like, some of this stuff's been passed on, and I go by what resonates. I go, that makes sense. That's all I can do. It isn't what happened to Moses. It isn't what happened to you. It's what my experience is when I get still, when I actually seek the truth, and not with this, but with this. Because as they say, that's the longest journey there is. You know, it's about a 1-foot drop. But most people want to go this way and push this down when it's supposed to come this way. And this is like a tuning fork to, you know, become this device that can help us instead of hinder us and try to kill us. And so, you know, this is the illusion is that we're doing this from our own source. And you know, bear with me a second and really try to take this trip that, you know, I've seen people struggle with a higher power, like what is God, what is this? It's like, you know, let's put all that aside for a second. Let's say what is not. And when I do something, when I'm standing up here, I'm talking, I have no idea how I can convert thoughts at a rate, and ideas can pop into my mind, and how many of us have had one that pops in that's spirit-filled and it's right at the right time. It pops in there. I can speak to you. It's such a quick pace. I don't have to stop, gather, I move my hand. Did I stop and go, I will my hand to move forward? You know, no, I just did it. And I did it within the seconds. And I heard a great saying years ago by one of my mentors was, in our natural state, we co-create. So I can't even figure out stuff. I can't figure out how food goes in this end, comes out the other end, and helps my body, and does this, and does that. But I go around expelling that I know things, and you know, and so in my natural state, I co-create, I can relate to that. So when I stay with that awareness, that there isn't degrees. There is no degrees. Course in Miracles talks about this. You know, this is what people want to do, is create degrees in various ways, ones to hang on the wall. And we get these degrees. Well, God is up here, I'm down here. If I'm really bad, I go down there. And, you know, and if the world's spinning, my 5-year-old son asked me one time, he goes, Dad, if the world's spinning around, which way's up and which way's down? You know, that's the Princess Amberlin question right there, answer. I go, well, really, there's no such thing. But for the sake of conversation here on the planet, we're going to call that up. We're going to call this down. You know, it changes by the second. So we have all these we have all these illusions that we pretend that we're doing something. You know, somebody will say, "Man, I can deadlift 500 pounds. I'm strong." Compared to what? Compared to the field of gravity? Okay, I'm fast. That car is really fast. Compared to what? The speed of light? I mean, what are you comparing it to? And so it's like we have a blackout. I want to black out the real truth that's going on here so I can play this giant game of make-believe. And people really get good at it. I love what Leslie had told me one time. We were talking about growing up in the church, and we saw people that they were just, you know, this is the way to go, this is this and that. And I said, I came to a point, I was telling Leslie, I came to a point where I realized I didn't know, and they didn't either. And Leslie told me, he goes, yeah, and they were serious about it. They were serious in their unknowing. And so I grew up with this. You know, I remember one time sharing something with my dad, something on this path, because I started taking this journey away from a very dogmatic kind of organized way into what is truth. And I can't remember exactly what I told him. I'll never forget the look on his face. It was something that, in that moment, it took away all his rebuttals, all his answers, all his seminary work, everything. And he was floored. He had never heard this information, and he had no response. And I watched him lose himself, walk into the house, and the minute he walked into his study, he's always had a study wherever he goes, and he's got all this stuff in his books, and I watched him regain himself, his fictitious self. That this is this deal that we create this thing. And, you know, now the trick is to notice that in myself. How many times do I create this fictitious self to get out of the moment, to be creative? Can I do the hard work? It's all easy to be nice when everybody's nice. When it says love your enemy, you know, what are they talking about? I'm pretty sure they didn't mean go out and kill them, right? So, you know, do we take this as some temporary home, or do we take it as, you know, we watch people try to fight for this stuff and for their generations to come and gather up billions and billions of dollars. You know, that's fine. If you're passing it along, you're moving it, you're a conduit, you're a steward, that's fine. But to hoard it and get over here and collect resources for yourself, I mean, that is the absolute blasphemy, is that you're denying your truth. And so, you know, the Course in Miracles is real clear on that. The Course in Miracles talks about the ego uses comparison and judgment as these tools to separate and divide. And I love this one in the Course in Miracles. It says, to the ego, the mind is private. See, as long as I can keep this stuff up here in my workings, whatever I want to believe and do, and the secrets that you'll never get to know, what I really think, because there's a side of us, there's a side of me that you get to see that I'll never see. And then there's a side of me and my invisibility that I get to see that you'll never see. And so the trick is to stay open and aware and to stay into that moment of spirit and let the personality serve as a gift to do what it's meant to do, rather than to, you know, hoard things or become such a celebrity to, you know, bedazzle people. So, you know, I remember that statement. In our natural state, we co-create. And so the spirit is just the opposite of this, what the ego in the Course in Miracles talks about, using comparison and judgment as tools to separate and divide. You know, we use our ability, our natural given ability with the spirit that seeks to unify and heal. And it wants to bring us together. So if we're not that space, you know, Marcy used to talk about some of this stuff before I really could gather it. You want to hold space. I'm holding space for this, she'd tell me. And I was like, what do you mean? Dude, I wanted what I wanted, how I wanted it. What do you mean, hold space? You're holding space for what? You know? And we hold space in that moment of every second. The more we can hold it, and a good friend of ours said it was not how long you stay there, because we forget and we go to sleep. It's not how long you stay there, it's how many times you can return. Because then that shortens up. You know, that neural pathway in the brain, and now they've got lots of stuff in mental health where they do this, and they can redo patterns of damage that's happened in the path by basically creating a new channel, going to a new place of peace, rather than when you see something that makes you react and go to this negative space. So I want to hold that space, and I want to stay in that space just as long as I can. And when I get out, you know, become aware of that. One of my first attempts at really becoming conscious, because I used to do a lot of Native American ceremonies and get a lot of sweats. And one of the medicine men had told the guy that was getting ready for Sundance, he told him, you need to hold your prayer for 24 hours. And he said, well, I work at Coleman's, I'm the manager, and I talk to people all day. He just looked at him, he said, you need to hold your prayer for 24 hours. He said, but I talk to people on the phone, and I'm in conversation, you need to hold your prayer for 24 hours. And I think it took him, what he said, 84 days or something, before he could stay aware. And if you think it's easy, try it. Try to stay aware while you're having conversations, some background awareness into your actions, and monitor yourself for when you're playing your role as a skid. You know, and it's easy, I remember, especially getting together with the fellows, you know, you could talk about this, talk about that, and it's easy to lose oneself to where it's like, what purpose am I serving? And, you know, to stay in that place, one of the first times I tried that, I was mowing the lawn when we lived in Madeira. I was mowing the lawn in the backyard, and I said, I'm going to stay aware. And I'm mowing the yard, and I'm looking around, and the next thing you know, I'm in the front yard, mowing the yard. And I kind of, whoa, I was monitoring my thoughts. Where did I go? What have I been thinking? I couldn't really remember. It was just an endless stream, as Eckhart Tolle talks about, that was just, you know, like the speed of light chatter. Just, you know, mumble jumble. Okay, get back with it, right? Back on the horse. Mowing the yard, next thing you know, it's 2 hours later, I'm pulling into the Bank of America downtown. Man. And I started grabbing that, man, where do I go? Where do I go? It's like I just take a little mental, you know, evacuation there. And I'm not actually taking a mental evacuation, I'm staying mental. I'm very mental. And I'm not staying in the spirit. You know, and so the trick is to get that thing, this box up here, to shut up and listen to this. And with that, that is our message, you know, in the name of our group is unity, is bringing together, not trying to divide and try to separate. And so with that, at this time, we are going to do the offering. Thank you.